Hi, I'm Harrison Wyatt, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about siting a good place for a campfire, and I'm also going to be doing some cooking of some basic food as well. When starting this process, we need to think about a few features. First of all, safety is paramount. We also need to think about land ownership. Are we working somewhere where we know we are safe to light a fire, or is it shared ownership, or do we need to ask permission? We also need to think about the conditions and location of where we're going to actually have that fire. First of all, is it an open space? Do we need to think about the wind direction? How large a fire are we actually going to need? Where are we going to acquire our resources from? And also our proximity to water access, so that we can safely extinguish the fire when needed to, but also make sure we've got water on hand as well for safety. Today I'm here in my local school's woodland, and I've picked a nice open spot, making sure that I've got no dense tree cover directly above where I'm going to be having the fire. I've already started to prep my location just here. But a few of the other features that we need to think about are things like the soil that we're going to have the fire on. Is it perhaps roots or plant life, or is it perhaps peat, where that type of earth, when it's heated up, can retain that heat for a long time, and potentially think about the risk of fire relighting or reigniting itself. We also need to think about seasonality. Is it a dry season or a wet season? How are we going to acquire the wood and resources and fuel we need to have a fire? Perhaps in a wet season, we'll have to be strategic about our planning. Alternatively, in a dry season, we've got to be really careful about whether it's actually safe to have a fire in proximity to plant life that's dry or dead. A great way that fire siting can be taught to a client group is for them to actually help you over a period of time build either a temporary or a permanent fire site. That way they'll have a personal ownership over the location itself, and they'll be in the know when it comes to arriving or leaving that space, making sure that all fires are done safely and they are extinguished. They'll also be aware of where is safe to be in proximity to the fire, and knowing that they walk when they're entering that space. In preparation for my fire and cooking, I'm now going to go out exploring in my local woodland and collecting a range of small to medium-sized fuel. This is going to be dead standing wood, or even dry fallen branches, but preferably off the ground. I want to hear a snap when I break them. I'm looking for tiny small stuff to get my fire going, and then once that's ignited, I can then slowly build it up in size. As trees and bushes grow and battle for sunlight, they reach up vertically and focus their attention and energy on those uppermost branches, and quite often they will actually sacrifice lower ones that are then dropped and are hanging, air drying, ready to be picked up. Another fantastic thing we've got here in our local woodland is silver birch. I've mentioned this in a previous video, where the bark itself actually peels away and it's full of these fantastic oils, and these make a great fire lighting tool. One thing to be aware of when going and looking for resources in a woodland is to think about resource management and sustainability. We want to be making as minimal impact and only taking the resources we need for the size of fire we want to build. Collecting all of your fuel from one spot in the woodland would actually have an impact on that specific location. A really fun way to involve a young client group into this activity is effectively tell them that they're playing hide and seek with nature. When you start looking for these abandoned branches that are dropped and hanging, you will then find that they are everywhere. This process of finding and then organizing into size our kindling through to larger fuel can be a really fun process. So you can see here that I've prepped my inner fire square. This is roughly a meter or so across, and I've prepped all of my kindling all the way up to my medium-sized fuel on one side. I've got my water accessible in a bucket for quick submersion should anyone get burnt. I've also got a burns kit, and I've got a glove for when the fire gets up to a size that I'm able to burn something that's basically larger than my finger. I can see again, because it's such a dry season, that all of this on the floor here is really dry. So I'm going to clear it away as well, just so that I'm making sure that the fire doesn't spread easily. When thinking about fire lighting in a forest school session, we want to be thinking about how we can teach this to a group over a learning process. They first of all need to know the foundations of what a fire needs to be a fire. How are we going to maintain it? And also with that knowledge, when a fire is failing, how could we potentially correct it? We also want to think about safety. Whenever they're working in this space, we always take the respect position, which is on one knee. This is due to, should the fire potentially spit or become unsafe, we can quickly step up and out of the way. One of the core skills that we can teach initially as one of our main fire lighting techniques is with a flint and steel. And this is a great strength and hand-eye coordination skill. Using a little bit of cotton wool in a space as small as a little mess tin like this, you can teach them by aerating and spreading out that cotton wool so that oxygen can get to it. We're then going to apply heat with our flint and steel, like striking like so. And that cotton wool, our fuel, is burning. So we can represent that with our triangle here. We initially need a fuel. We need to collect something that we can burn. It's going to need access to oxygen to keep that flame going. And we also need a heat to get it started. Once we've initiated that fire, we can build in on each of those three segments to effectively keep feeding the fire and keep it lit. Thinking about skill development and progression over time, there are many different ways to light a fire. We can think about electricity, magnification, friction, things like a bow drill. Those are skills and bushcraft elements that you can add into your forest school sessions as you develop a group. But today, I'm going to be starting with a flint and steel. Having shown that initial skill with cotton wool, I've gone out and actually found some natural materials, things like my silver birch bark and this cat's tail from the reeds in the pond that we just have over the hill. I've also made these feather sticks, and having prepped a breadstick to do some cooking on, I've collected up the shavings as well for some great kindling. Having prepped my fire, I've also prepped my cooking station. So I've got some clean water for drinking that I'm going to be boiling up in this hanging kettle pot. I've got my washing up bowl here with some washing up liquid in it. I've also got my food and my chopping board in there. And then I've got some string and 3 poles that I'm going to turn into a tripod for that hanging pot. So I can do that now. Again, thinking the more prep that I do prior to lighting the fire, the less rushed I'm going to be. And it's the same when it comes to the actual managing of the fire. The more prep I can do beforehand rather than during the lighting of the fire, the less rushed I'm gonna be, and then I'm not gonna waste my carefully collected resources. Thinking about where I'm going to be wanting to work, I've mounted my tripod. For now, I can prep it by measuring out roughly where I want that hanging pot to be. And then until I'm ready for it, I can move it out the way. So for my hanging pot to be adjustable, I'm going to tie a rolling hitch. That way, should the fire get low, I can lower the pot down. And should I want to build up the fire, I can take my pot up. I'm now going to get this fire going. Starting with my sort of visual of a triangle, it's a great reminder for whenever you're teaching a group that the fire triangle, the heat, oxygen and fuel. It's also a nice visual for the size of the fire that we're going to be building. We don't want it to be much bigger than this, but it needs to be a sizable enough fire that it's safe to be cooking on. I want to be lifting my first sort of kindling and tinder off the ground. So I'm going to take a couple of my sort of smaller, medium sized bits here. And I'm going to lay them in what I like to use as a pattern, which is really memorable for kids, the Jenga pattern. So 3 one way and 3 the other way, leaving gaps in between. And that again allows the oxygen to get through and underneath the flame. Then grab this cat's tail, this sort of nature's cotton wool. And again, as I did before, just pull it all apart, really make it nice and soft aerated, because we want the oxygen to be able to get into those gaps. I've got my lovely silver birch bark here that I can lay over the top with those fantastic oils. And again, once I've ignited the fire, I want to be putting the fuel over the middle where that flame's going to be nice and hot. I can then think about where I might put my feather sticks on. Balance, there we go. I've then got all of these shavings that I made before. And then what I can do is with these fine sort of matchstick thin twigs, I can gently lay them on as it starts to burn. I can prep the first few, trying to find the finest of them. I'm going to lay those around. But again, what I don't want to be doing is smothering the fire, and that continues as it starts to burn and build. If you lay too much fuel on all at once, then unfortunately you're taking out another section of the triangle, the oxygen. So I want plenty of access to my cat's tail where I can reach in with my flint and steel to get that ember going. Let's just get a couple more of these. And then we'll see if we can get it started. Okay, so again, working in towards the heart of that fire, I want to be working nice and close, creating nice big sparks. So as I said before, placing the fuel over the flame. And effectively what I want to do is find the balance between adding fuel that's the right sort of size, but so that it doesn't burn out too quickly. So now I'm going to start to go up in size. can start to be a little bit more confident with it now as well. Now that I've got a regular flame, I'm looking to see my feather sticks have burnt through. But what I've also done by building that initial sort of Jenga pattern is I've also given fuel for the flame to be working towards as well. What you might find with younger learners is that from the outset, they might want to wear the safety glove. But of course, as we're building and working with fire, we also want to be teaching that level of safety and resilience as well. So as I get slightly larger here, I can really start to feel the heat of my fire going. So I will be placing that glove on now that I've got to about the size of my pinky as I'm building up. So because it's lovely and dry, I didn't actually have to use much of what I've collected, but it's always better to have more than you need. And again, I can help feed the fire with those lovely dry shavings. But another great tip, should you want to let the fire die down, but potentially not extinguish it straight away, it's great to keep some set to one side so that it's nice and easy to rekindle that fire and get it going again. When I'm placing the wood on the fire, I want to be careful that I'm not putting the branches or like sticks and bits of wood so close together that I'm again smothering it. And again, I'm being strategic about where I'm placing the wood. Thinking about the weather conditions as well. I've got a little gentle breeze and I can see the fire is burning that way. I don't want it to quickly sort of work itself that way too much. So I might put fuel on this side. That's going to make the wood burn slightly slower as well, because it'll also provide a little bit of a windshield. Now that I've got that fire going, I'm going to start some of my food prep. So first of all, I have prepped my breadstick earlier by shaving off the outermost edge. I can again increase its level of hygiene by quickly burning it in the fire, just to burn off any excess bacteria. Just a quick burn, and then I'm going to prep my dough. So I've got this little container here. And this is a great one. Really, really simple, but it's fantastic to get your hands on, get a little bit messy. So I've just got some plain flour and some dried skimmed milk. As I do this food prep, I'm always keeping a close eye on the fire, making sure that it's not burning away too quickly, and I'm continuing to add that fuel. But at the same time, I'm quite comfortable now that it's built up to this size that I can let it burn down a little bit so that I'm not burning through those fuels so quickly. Now I'm going to add a little bit of water, just a little bit at a time. And I'm going to mix that in. Like I said, it's really hands-on and get involved. Just going to lay a few slightly larger bits of fuel over the fire. Just to keep it going whilst I'm doing this food prep. The great thing about this is if at any point you do, as I've done, add a little bit too much water, you can always just add a little bit more flour. Effectively, what we're trying to do is give it a nice, good mix, getting rid of all the lumps. And getting it to a point where it's starting to sort of collect itself into that dough. A great learning point for this is quite often you'll get messy, but the more you work at it, your hands will again become clean as you get it to the right consistency. Okay, I'm quite happy with the whereabouts that's got to now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it out of the bowl and getting a little bit of flour on on my clean hand. I'm just going to work it in my hands here. And again, the more I work it, the more I'm actually going to clean my other hand off. If at any point it does start to stick to my hands, I can always just add a little bit more flour. There we go. Got myself a little bit of dough. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to apply it to my breadstick. Again, not wanting it to stick to my breadstick, I can use a little bit of flour. And then I'm basically going to wrap my dough around the stick. I want it to be relatively thin, just so I know that it's going to cook nice and easily. So I'm just spreading it out, connecting it up with a little pinch. There we go. So having got my bread on my breadstick, now what I'm going to do is I want to mount it over the fire. So I'm going to grab this log here. And having sharpened the end of my breadstick, I can stick it into the ground. Bring an eye on the fire. I'm going to add a little bit more fuel. What I'm also going to do is I'm actually going to lay these two side logs in, and I want to work them in to a point where I'm going to have enough coverage that I can balance my frying pan on, ready for my next bit of cooking. So what I might do is a little bit of movement and maintenance just to bring that fire in. It's more of a hunter's fire lay. What I can do whilst that's burning away, I'm going to keep an eye on my bread, and I'm also going to clean up as I go along. why not get the kettle going? So now that I've got the kettle over the fire, that's going to start heating up my water, ready for a coffee. I've got my bread baking away. I can do a little bit of washing up. And I'm also going to clean off my frying pan, ready for my mushrooms. So I've got my chopping board here. Now, of course, in a forest school situation, through this development, you could do prep and foraging of natural local mushrooms. But for today, I've just got some shop bought. I've also got a little bit of oil to cook with in my frying pan. Once again, thinking about hygiene, I'm going to be using my sheath knife as it's my go-to tool out here in the woods, but I want to clean off the blade. So I'm going to quickly hold it in the flame just to kill off any bacteria. As I said before, keeping a close eye on the fire whilst I'm doing all the cook prep, I can think about that fire triangle. And if at any point I do see it dying down too much, I can not only feed it fuel, hope that it is retaining its heat, but I can also feed it oxygen with a long, slow couple of breaths. Now that I've covered over the flame with my frying pan, I'm going to gently lower my hanging pot, just so it's retaining that heat. I can also, during this time, check on my bread. I'm looking for this lovely golden brown colour, but I want it all around. So I'm going to keep rotating it, and I can get it in nice and close to the fire now as well. There's nothing quite like the sizzling of cooking over a nice campfire. A great thing about the Hunter Fires lay is the channeling effect that it has when I'm applying oxygen with my breath. It's just going to feed it right into the heart of that fire. Whilst I'm working and cooking around the fire, I want to make sure that I'm tidying up as I go along. This means that I have less work to do when I'm done, but of course I want to be making sure that I'm leaving as little impact as well. So I'm tidying up and making sure that I'm not leaving any litter behind. So again, with baking my bread, I want to be looking for that nice golden crisp, making sure that I'm not putting it too close to the flame. I can tap the bread to hear whether it's gone that sort of lovely crisp and hollow brown. I can see on this side it still needs a little bit more time, so I'm going to try and balance it next to the fire. Looking at these mushrooms now, they're looking nice and cooked. They're starting to crisp up a little bit as well. They're going to be really tasty. One of the great lessons you can teach during a cooking session is about heat transfer, thinking about different materials. As you sort of discuss the fuels that you collected to create your fire in the first place, you can also discuss how metal transfers heat really effectively. That's why we use it for cooking. Thinking about that, I want to be careful about where I'm placing it, my frying pan down, so as I'm not putting it on the flammable materials that I discussed earlier. Like I said, letting my fire down, it's still retaining loads of heat and it's still white hot. Having saved some of my kindling, I can sprinkle it on, ready to produce a flame. And then I can add some larger fuel. At this point now, other than cooking to boil my water, I'm effectively done. So I don't want to add too much more fuel because that's effectively wasting my resources. So what I've still got to the one side, I'm going to be saving for next time. now check my bread. It's gone nice and crispy. So what I'm going to be able to do is I'm going to peel it off my breadstick. I'm going to enjoy it with my mushrooms. With a careful twist, I've now got a nice, warm, toasty baguette that I can have my mushrooms in. Delicious. This simple baguette and mushroom recipe is so basic and really great for these forest school sessions because it's really achievable and it's really adjustable as well. Should you want to have different dietary requirements or potentially make it sweet, you could add sugar to the base dough before you bake it. So there's loads of different options. With that heat going, I'm going to check my kettle in just a minute once I've enjoyed my baguette. But hopefully that water will be boiling and I'll be able to make myself a nice cup of coffee. Having left the frying pan off to one side for now, for a few minutes, hopefully it will have cooled down enough that I can safely move it to a more secure area. I can do so by testing with my hand, not by physical contact, but close proximity. I can feel that's no longer retained its heat. Having placed the two slightly larger logs to either side for stability for the frying pan, I don't necessarily need to burn them away anymore as a resource. So what I'm going to do is carefully, I'm going to roll them out to one side and let them cool. Check this kettle pot now. Definitely got simmering bubbles starting to form. Here I have my travel mug and my little pot of travel coffee. So I'm going to put just a little amount in there. Then once that hot water's boiled, I'll be able to pour it in. At the moment, this is still burning away quite well. Should I think that I still need a little bit more time to boil that water, I could obviously roll those two side logs back in to really keep the heat in, and again use that hunter's fire lay to blow oxygen into that channel of the heart of the fire. But at the moment I'm starting to see steam, so I'm pretty happy that it's boiling. Again, keeping a close eye on my boiling pot. I can see steam coming from the spout, but I can adjust the height with my rolling hitch just to get it nicely to the boil. Got plenty of steam coming now. I think it's time to pour. There we go. Cheers. Nice hot coffee. And having boiled enough water, I can now remove the tripod carefully off and away from the fire to let it cool. Having done all the cooking I want to now, I'm going to let the fire burn down, and effectively I'm going to start to extinguish it. I'm going to dismantle my site, but I will cover all of that in a future video.